What's up, guys? It's Mike with Shallow Reefing, coming back at you with another video. And today, you saw my last video with my ICP test. There are some things going on in the reef tank, mostly high phosphates. So I will let you guys know what I think caused my high phosphates, and I'll kind of fill you in on how I'm going to remedy this high phosphate problem, which has been the bane of my existence. Because I'm pretty sure my high phosphates and the imbalance in nitrogen to phosphate ratio has caused cyano in my tank. Slowly fighting back cyano, but let's see if this new way I'm going about it is going to work. The tank's looking pretty good overall. Cyano is still kind of in those low flow areas, but nowhere near as bad as it once was. Obviously, if you like these scullies, these are amazing. Check out the previous video, and I got the scullies looking awesome. But I know whenever my phosphates are way too high, and as you saw in the last video, they creeped up to almost 0.3. You can see I got some, paling of corals. I don't know if you can see that. Right behind that pink Cadillac coral is my Garf bonsai, and you can see it is STNing at the base. Now, anytime that this coral starts losing tissue, it is because of high phosphates. That STN on that Garf bonsai is absolutely killing me. I cannot wait to get rid of that STN and combat these high phosphates. Additionally, this WWC yellow tip doesn't have yellow tips on it when the phosphates get too high. But one of the things that I've been doing, and I think it's kind of because of this channel I've been doing it, I've been targeting one thing at a time because I want controlled experiments. I want to do Dr. Tim's and only Dr. Tim's and nothing else in order to get rid of cyano. I want to do Timmy Clean and nothing else to get rid of cyano. I want to do, coral balance and nothing else in order to reduce phosphates. I think, those experiments have their place, but they've kind of been derailing me in a way. Here's what I mean. When we have a reef tank, it is a dynamic ecosystem. And a lot of things we do have a synergistic effect, and they compound over the time. So just doing one thing might move the needle a little bit, but if you do 2 or 3 things to change up what you are doing or to combat cyano versus just doing one thing to combat cyano, you're going to have a magnitude of differences with combating cyano. So what I'm going to do is do a couple different methods all at once. So nitrates and phosphates, they're what you put into the tank. And I've chronically had high phosphates, and I always thought, oh, it was the reefroids that are known to have high phosphates, so I stopped using reefroids. And I was like, yeah, a lot of this stuff is probably built up in the system, let's take it out. Well, I've been combating high phosphates for a long time. Then I was listening to Ryan from BRS. He's talking about the nitrogen to phosphate ratio of what you're putting in the tank. I'm like, well, duh, that makes sense. And whenever I've been doing my homemade food with like the salmon and some Calanus and mysis shrimp and everything kind of blended up, I'd always spike my phosphate levels up. So I just stopped using that. But then I was like, you know what? I haven't used that in a while, but my phosphate levels are still increasing. So then I looked up, New Life Spectrum doesn't really have it that I can find, the nitrogen phosphate ratio, but all these pellet foods, they're kind of nutrient dense, but none of them are screaming to me that they have high phosphates. Except for Calanus. Calanus has a 20-to-1 ratio of nitrogen to phosphorus. Now keep this in mind, some of the other foods have like a 35-to-1 nitrogen to phosphorus ratio. So whenever you are putting Calanus in your tank, you are spiking your phosphates relative to your nitrates. And ideally, I go based off the Fauna Marin method, you want about a 100-to-1 ratio between nitrogen to phosphorus, or phosphates. So my handy dandy reef log, since I had 0.3 phosphates on the 18th of May, I have done a 20-gallon and then a 30-gallon water change, and every time I do that, I put in 10 milliliters of Brightwell Phosphate E prior to my water change and put in the filter socks. So, step 1, Brightwell Phosphate E. Every water change, I'm gonna put 10 milliliters into my tank, into the filter socks, and skimming it out. Which phosphate E has lanthanum chloride in it. But I just did the ICP total test, and the way I'm doing my phosphate E with lanthanum chloride is showing no signs of lanthanum in my tank, which is awesome. Now, I have done GFO in the past, and I don't have much left because honestly, yes, GFO is good for certain things. It does remove heavy metals, but if I'm removing heavy metals, I'm also removing a lot of those trace elements. And as you saw on the previous video, my trace elements were really low, and I've started bumping them up, and they're still kind of a little bit wonky in some areas. So I'm not going to be using GFO. What am I going to be using instead? Phosguard. I am using Phosguard because it is aluminum oxide and it doesn't remove anything else except for phosphates. Now I could do ROFOS and everything like that, but I have used Phosguard and I like it. And none of the aluminum leaches, and I've never had aluminum leach, and I've been doing ICP tests. I'm using Phosguard in my tank. Now there's one other thing that I've used in the past, and I had mixed reviews on it, but hear me out, thought process. Coral balance. Yes, this is Fauna Marin. Yes, I did say I don't know if it really does much. When I initially used it, had a huge flush in the system, increased my skim mate production and everything. I have no idea what's going on in this, but I can tell you that my skimmer production was through the roof when I used it. So I'm going to be using this as directed, and hopefully this 3-pronged approach, technically 4-pronged, will eliminate a lot of my phosphates and get it in an acceptable ratio. So let's recap. What am I doing? I have isolated the source of the phosphate, aka the Calanus. Not going to be feeding my fish Calanus anymore because, well, they were mostly for my Anthias, and as you saw in my other video, my Anthias got the tar beat out of it by fish aggression. So reducing the source of the phosphates. I have been doing water changes. I'm doing 10% weekly water changes on the tank, siphoning out all the detritus, hitting that really hard. I'm increasing my skimmer production. I am taking out the quilt bedding more often, changing out those filter socks a little bit more often. I am doing lanthanum chloride in my system with Phosphate E. I'm going to be doing coral bounce, and then to top it all off, I'm going to be using aluminum oxide, that Phosguard from Seachem. Now, this should hopefully bring my phosphates way down. Let's hope. So currently my phosphates are at 0.17. Want to get it down to below 0.1. So let's see, we'll do a little before and after of how all this kind of works together synergistically, and seeing if a holistic approach is way better than just doing one thing. I think what I've learned in this hobby is hitting it with multiple hammers is better than just hitting it with one hammer. Also, I love how this Micromusa has like multicolors in it in low light setting, but in higher light setting, it's kind of bland. Use coral balance, just be prepared. Your whole tank is gonna get a little bit cloudy at first, but your skimmer will pull it all out and it's gonna go crazy. All right guys, so it's been a couple weeks since I did everything with my tank and really hitting the phosphate. So it's been about 3 weeks to a month, and did everything I do pay off? So you can see phosphates are at 0.08 and nitrates are at 10.6. Now my tank has not been at those levels for nitrates and phosphates since June of the first year that I had the tank. So that means my tank was, I think, 8 months old the last time I had that level of phosphates. It's always run high nitrates and phosphates, but mostly phosphates. And I'll tell you what I did. First of all, what makes this even more impressive is if you watch my previous video, there's still calc paste in my tank, meaning I torched a ton of mushroom corals only a couple days prior to me taking these measurements. Meaning, I probably had, a spike in nitrates and phosphates from all these dead corals, and nothing happened to my water. It's actually gotten better. So everything I'm doing is definitely working. Now, let's go over everything I did so that you can follow this easy to follow recipe. Step 1, find the inputs. So my input was a lot of Calanus that I was feeding my fish. Stopped feeding Calanus entirely and reduced my feeding just a little bit of pellets, maybe like 3 or 4 pellets every feed, and I feed twice a day. So that little bit helped. I also changed out my filter floss. I used to do it every 3 days, now I'm doing it every 2 days. And my filter socks used to change out every once a week, and now I'm doing it every 5 days. And I also increased my skimmer production. I'm still doing my 10% weekly water changes, but I'm just putting 10 milliliters of Phosphate E into my overflow, spreading it out over 20, 30 minutes. 10 milliliters in my overflow right before I do my water change the night before. Super easy. Then I'm running Phosguard. Now I'm not running GFO because GFO can remove a bunch of trace elements, and I'm really low on trace elements if you saw my other videos. So I'm running this a little bit below the recommended dosage because they say, do a little slow So this is just a little bit below the recommended dosage, and it's kicking butt. Then I'm also doing coral balance. Every 4 days, doing 2 scoops of coral balance. Now this actually like binds up phosphates and supposed to permanently reduce it. I did a video on it, but I think it's more of a holistic approach where you have to use this in tandem with everything else. And I'll tell you what, I like how it feeds my corals too. And I've continued to do my bacteria dosing because I have it, and why not just continue to use it. This Bactotherapy and Bacto blend with Bacto Energy from Fauna Marin, still using that, and I think it really does help, especially when in combination with water changes. I do it right after water change, and it just adds more of those beneficial bacteria back into my system. And it helps bring down my nitrates and phosphate levels. Now here's the thing, that is a ton of stuff going on, and a lot of like, not mad scientisty things, but a lot of different things I'm doing with the tank. But here's what I want you guys to realize. I have been kind of doing all these experiments on the tank, trying to limit one factor to the other for years. And I just have not had the success that I wanted because I was only doing one thing at a time. This whole process has kind of made me look at my tank a different way. I used to think of it, oh, I want to do these things to show people how they can, you know, use this product here or there to help out with this or that or the other. But really, this is a multifaceted approach. You have to not just do one thing different for your tank if you're really going to try to combat all of your issues in the tank, because it's probably a culmination of things that have led you to this point. For me, it was I fed Reef fries really heavy early on, and I was feeding Calanus for my Anthias because Calanus is really great for the Anthias, but I just kept giving them more and more feeds because I wanted my fish to be healthy and not to fight each other. And as soon as I did that, my phosphate levels spiked. And with those phosphate levels being as high as they were, I did have some coral recession. So you can kind of see on the underside of my Garf Bonsai, starting to STN, and that's usually due to low potassium or high phosphate levels. So I know when that happens, I gotta get this corrected. I'll tell you who loved the high phosphate levels were these stinking mushrooms that I had to just destroy because they were just going like crazy in my tank. And now they're not, thank God. If I could leave you guys with one tip, one piece of advice is look at your tank holistically. Don't just change one thing and treat it like an experiment. If you have a problem, hit it from multiple angles. If I have high phosphates, reduce my feeding, reduce my inputs, increase my outputs, water changes. And if I can't get it that way, then don't just do a little GFO, do some Phosguard, and do, you know, maybe a little lanthanum chloride with Phosphate E, and it's been wonderful for the system. I'm super happy with this. This is like the first time in 2.5 years that I have these levels, and it's not about chasing numbers, it's about listening to your corals and seeing what your corals are saying, and my corals are saying, my SPS especially, are like too high. Bring those levels down, and the corals that I don't want to go like crazy growth-wise are going crazy because they love those high phosphate levels like those soft corals. So guys, that's all I got for you this time. If you like what you see here and you want to see more, click the subscribe button. Give me a like, give me a comment below, and let me know how you like this video. And as always, I will see you later.